They saw a disabled woman, alone, quiet, and seated in first class. What they didn't see was the storm she was capable of unleashing. This is the untold story of Jessica Carter, a woman who boarded Flight 808 with a cane in one hand. But when airport security dragged her off the plane based on nothing but suspicion and prejudice, Jessica didn't just push back. She rewrote the future of the airline industry, 4,000 Bitcoin at a time. What's up, story lovers? Welcome to Story Room by Rico, where we bring you gripping tales that'll keep you hooked. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss a story. Also, let us know in the comments section where you're watching from. In the heart of the Miami International Airport, the energy buzzed like a hive, businessmen racing for red ice, children dragging worn plush toys, and attendants herding the restless. But amid the chaos, one woman moved with grace and determination. Jessica Carter. She wasn't flashy. Her wheelchair glided silently. Her clothes were modest, pressed black slacks, a cashmere wrap the color of storm clouds, and a simple gold bracelet that caught the light whenever her left hand moved. Her right hand steadied a sleek, carbon fiber walking cane with a carved ivory handle. She carried herself like someone used to being overlooked, but unbothered by it. Her ticket, first class, seat 4A, nonstop to New York. Jessica rolled up to gate 47B with 20 minutes to spare. The boarding pass shone on her phone. A few glances from passengers, nothing new. But then, something shifted. A gate attendant in a burgundy blazer leaned toward the podium, peering at Jessica, then whispering something to her colleague. Both glanced again. Jessica noticed. She was used to that look. The one people gave when they thought your status didn't match your skin, or your seat didn't match your wheelchair. Still, she said nothing. She only smiled politely and held out her phone. Jessica Carter. First class. Gate agent asked. This must be a mistake. You're flying alone. Jessica's brow barely moved. That's correct. Gate agent replied. Just a moment. We'll get this sorted. Jessica waited, unmoving. A small line began forming behind her. But the gate agent didn't scan her boarding pass. Instead, she stepped away and returned moments later with airport security. Two men, one stocky, one tall, flanked Jessica like bookends. Security officer. Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us. Jessica, calm but sharp. On what grounds? Security officer. You've been flagged for verification. It's just a routine check. Routine wasn't routine at all, and Jessica knew it. She could hear the hush behind her, the stares, the judgment, but she didn't resist. She placed her cane across her lap and followed their lead, wheelchair wheels humming beneath her. She was escorted off the jetway to a dim corner of the terminal. The questions began. Why are you flying first class? Who purchased this ticket? Are you sure this isn't fraud? She answered each one. Calm, clear, without a single rise in her tone. They searched her bag, scanned her ID 3 times, ran her name through whatever system made them feel justified. But what they didn't know, what not a single one of them realized, was that Jessica Carter wasn't just a passenger. She was one of the key financial architects behind an airline merger that would shape the future of American aviation. And in less than 24 hours, she would sit across from board members who'd pray for her approval. And right now, they had just dragged the queen off her own chessboard. You've seen the surface. But what lies beneath the quiet grace of Jessica Carter is a force no one expected. Stay with us as the story deepens and justice finds its wings. Backhand index pointing right. If you're captivated already, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. Jessica Carter finally took her seat, 4A window side. Her leg brace glinted faintly as she maneuvered herself in with practiced grace. The noise around her faded to a dull murmur. Inside, she was fire, but on the outside, she was still and calm. A mask honed by years in boardrooms and battles fought quietly but fiercely. She gazed out the window, watching the rain thread silver lines across the tarmac. Every droplet was a reminder of every time she had been second-guessed, overlooked, or outright dismissed. And yet she was still here. She hadn't risen to power through luck. It had been precision, endurance, vision. Her fingers tapped lightly on the armrest. Her mind ran over the numbers: 4,000 Bitcoin in leveraged funding, strategically positioned and carefully shielded. Today it was worth billions. And in less than a week, the company whose agents had dragged her off the tarmac would be facing a new merger, the one she had orchestrated. But the fight wasn't over yet. Flight attendant Olivia approached again, her smile now tight, her voice syrupy. "Miss Carter, would you like a warm towel?" The tone, that tone. Too polite, the kind you use when someone's presence bothers you but you can't say so out loud. Jessica nodded wordlessly. A white towel was handed over. Warm, yes, but far colder than the one the man in 4C had received a few minutes earlier. That one had been accompanied by a genuine smile, small talk, even a personal note from the captain. She had observed it all. Then came the offer for drinks. Champagne for the rest. Sparkling water for Jessica. She didn't argue. Let them keep underestimating her. She sipped the water, her eyes slowly moving across the faces of the cabin. Some glanced at her brace. Others studied her skin, unsure of how to categorize her. Only a few looked directly at her, and those who did wore the polite, masked expressions that said, "She's not like us." She remembered what the gate agent had whispered to security. "She's probably faking the ticket." That line stayed with her. It was more than doubt, it was presumption. It assumed a certain type of person didn't belong in first class, didn't belong in deals, didn't belong in power. And people like Jessica, black, disabled, quiet, were too often misread as invisible or unimportant. At cruising altitude, the cabin darkened, and so did Jessica's expression. She leaned slightly forward, pulling out a faded leather wallet. From it, a small photo slipped into her hand, her younger self in braces at 12, sitting next to her father in a wheelchair. He had once been a mechanic, then a small-time engineer, then, finally, a paraplegic after a workplace accident. Her mother had raised hell to get compensation, but Jessica had learned the more powerful route. Get behind the curtain, own the company, and rewrite the rules entirely. That photo reminded her why this mattered. She didn't just represent herself. She represented every quiet, underestimated person sitting alone in a room full of noise they weren't invited into. Suddenly, a small commotion ahead. Olivia had returned. This time, her face red with tension. "I'm sorry, Miss Carter, but we've had a seat reassignment issue. We're going to need you to move to economy." The words were ice. Jessica turned slowly, her eyes locking on Olivia's. "I'm sorry, what?" "We overbooked first class. A platinum-level executive from our corporate wing has just boarded, and protocol dictates." "Protocol?" Jessica said softly, her voice flat. Her hand reached slowly into her sweater. She pulled out a silver pin, a small, simple emblem. Olivia squinted. The flight attendant's expression changed, then dropped entirely, because it wasn't just a pin. It was the private insignia of Altura's Holdings, the entity behind the entire airline's pending merger. Jessica rose slowly, balanced against the seat. "You're asking me," she said, her voice clear and firm, "to give up my seat to someone in my own company?" The silence in the cabin was immediate. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She didn't need to, because in that moment Olivia, and everyone else, realized who Jessica Carter really was. If you've made it this far, you're only beginning to uncover Jessica Carter's powerful journey. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because the real reckoning is still ahead. When Jessica Carter returned to her hotel suite that evening, she didn't cry. She didn't shout or storm into anyone's office. Instead, she opened her laptop, logged into a secure intranet portal, and began compiling every detail: times, names, actions, audio cues, and expressions. Each note was clinical, thorough, and weaponized with the calm rage of someone too powerful to need to raise their voice. And then, she clicked send. That message went to what insiders called the Whisper Network, a secure thread reserved for the core stakeholders in the upcoming $4 billion airline merger. Not lawyers, not publicists, the decision makers, CEOs, CFOs, board members, powerhouses behind the curtain. Jessica's subject line: service culture audit, flagged incident, executive disguised. Attached were her findings, her boarding pass, her recording, and a still photo of her, being pulled from the jet bridge by security, arms outstretched, legs braced with metal, face unreadable. It didn't take long. By sunrise, there were frantic calls between executives on both coasts. Some gasped, some groaned. One reportedly spilled coffee down his tie while opening her report on a red-eye to London. Jessica hadn't just documented an act of discrimination. She'd exposed a culture problem, one that, if made public, could kill the merger instantly. And then something curious happened. Jessica's phone rang. Not her personal phone. Not the one linked to her social media. The encrypted line used only by fellow executives. She let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then she answered. Jessica, firm, even tone. "Good morning, Gregory. I assume this isn't a courtesy call." Gregory rattled corporate voice. "Jessica, my God, why didn't you tell us you were flying yesterday?" "Jessica, why should I have to?" The man on the other end sighed. "Gregory, we want to fix this. Internally. Quietly. What do you need?" Jessica, pause. "I'll tell you what I deserve. But not yet. First, I want to see what your team does without being told." And with that, she hung up. For the next 72 hours, she watched quietly as her incident began to ripple through the company. The airline released a lukewarm statement about inclusivity training. The gate agent involved was placed on leave pending review. A PR firm drafted a press release that never made it to print. But Jessica wasn't watching them. She was watching who said nothing. Are you feeling the weight of Jessica's story? The quiet strength it takes to walk through discrimination with your dignity intact, and then hold the system accountable without saying a word? If you believe stories like this need to be told and heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support helps bring these powerful narratives to light. Now, let's keep going. Jessica arrived at the headquarters dressed not for war, but for legacy. Her tailored charcoal suit whispered power without pretension. Her hair was pulled back into a sleek, no-nonsense bun, and her cane, often mistaken for a symbol of fragility, tapped out a rhythm of command with every step she took through the gleaming marble lobby of North Star Aviation's executive tower. The receptionist glanced up and froze mid-greeting, then lowered her eyes, clearly aware of who Jessica Carter was now. Not just a passenger, not just a name on a merger spreadsheet, but the woman who had exposed the crack running through their corporate foundation. Jessica nodded once. "I'm here for the 9 a.m. No badge check. No sign-in. Just a silent gesture toward the elevators and a look of apology that didn't quite make it to the receptionist's lips. Inside the boardroom, the tension was nearly visible. 15 men and 2 women sat around the table, each with a digital portfolio open, a carefully prepared agenda in front of them, and a healthy dose of panic behind their practiced smiles. At the head of the table sat Gregory Langford, interim CEO of Skybridge Airlines, one half of the merger equation. His salt and pepper beard looked freshly trimmed, his suit sharp, his handshake neutral. But Jessica didn't take it. She placed her phone gently on the table, screen down, and took a seat, not at the side, but directly across from Gregory. "Let's begin," she said. "I understand this was supposed to be a post-merger integration meeting, but it seems we have an integrity crisis to discuss first." Gregory cleared his throat, obviously wanting to speak first, but Jessica leaned forward. "I'll make this easy for everyone. I'm not here to be coddled. I'm not here for apologies written by your legal department. I'm here to see what kind of company I'm helping to build." One of the board members, a younger man with a LinkedIn perfect smile, tried to interject. "Ms. Carter, we all saw your report, and I think we can agree the behavior you encountered is unacceptable. However," she raised one hand, "that's where you stop." The room fell silent. There's a difference between unacceptable and systemic. What I experienced wasn't an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a culture your brand has nurtured for years. I was tested, humiliated, and escorted from a plane because someone didn't believe a black disabled woman could possibly be sitting in first class without special assistance or fraud. That wasn't a rogue employee. That was your system, working exactly as it was built. The air in the room thickened. No one made eye contact. Everyone was calculating the weight of her words, the cost of silence. Then she dropped the real bomb. "I've recommended a hold on the merger." Every head turned. Gregory's fingers twitched over his tablet. "You what?" "I've asked the other half of the board to pause final signatures," she said coolly, "until we can complete a comprehensive audit of your service and hiring practices. I've also invited an independent review firm to investigate discriminatory behaviors across both airlines." The room erupted in murmurs, some shocked, some defensive, all off balance. And before anyone throws around words like defamation or damaging shareholder trust, I'd like to remind you, I've brought $4 billion in crypto-backed funding to this table. I don't threaten, I act. Gregory leaned forward finally, his voice low and measured. "Jessica, surely, there's another way to resolve this without jeopardizing the entire deal. We've worked for years on this." Jessica didn't flinch. "I didn't jeopardize anything. You did. When you allowed a culture where I could be treated that way without anyone stepping in to ask why. If I hadn't been who I am, how many other people would have gone unnoticed, discarded, or quietly refunded?" There it was. Not anger, not outrage, just truth. And truth was heavier than fury. She stood, slowly, bracing herself on her cane, eyes sweeping across the table. "I'll be back in 2 weeks. Until then, you have a chance to do more than fix this. You can transform it. But that's up to you." Then she turned and walked out. The door clicked shut behind her, and for a long time, no one in that boardroom said a word. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks in which the corporate world buzzed with speculation. Rumors slipped out like steam from a boiling pot. Whispers in hangars, murmurs in executive suites, heated threads in forums for aviation professionals. Jessica Carter's name was no longer just a footnote on a funding file. She was now the pivot around which Skybridge's future turned. Back at headquarters, the boardroom no longer felt like a fortress. Something had shifted. When Jessica returned, she didn't walk in with lawyers or a media entourage. She didn't need to. Her leverage wasn't just money anymore, it was momentum. Gregory Langford stood as she entered. This time, he didn't extend his hand. He offered a nod, humbled. She took her place at the table once more, setting down a simple folder. No theatrics, no raised voice, just a phrase that would change everything. I have the new policy draft here. I suggest you all read it carefully, because the culture you're used to is done. The Jessica Carter Clause. The first page bore a name most companies only reserved for conference keynotes or diversity spotlights. But Jessica wasn't interested in symbolism. She wanted infrastructure. The Jessica Carter Clause, as it was quickly dubbed, outlined clear, actionable mandates. All frontline airline employees, from gate agents to flight attendants, must undergo comprehensive anti-bias training, reviewed annually and conducted by third-party organizations unaffiliated with either airline. Every discriminatory complaint must be escalated within 48 hours and reviewed by an independent ethics board, co-chaired by a rotating seat occupied by a passenger-elected community advocate. Secret shopper evaluations would be introduced at random across all hubs and routes, focusing on treatment differences across race, gender presentation, mobility status, and perceived socioeconomic standing. Real consequences. Managers and employees found complicit in repeated violations would be subject to demotion or contract non-renewal. No excuses. No quiet transfers. New signage and support. All first-class lounges and boarding areas were to be redesigned with clear visibility and inclusive messaging. Images of diverse travelers, accessible seating priority reminders, multilingual information panels. Jessica closed the folder and said quietly, "You can't teach people compassion, but you can create a system where cruelty costs too much to keep around." The room was silent. One of the younger executives, an Asian American woman named Lillian, nodded slowly and raised her hand. "I've been here 5 years," she said. "I've seen the microaggressions. I've seen the hiring decisions. I want to help implement this, personally." That broke the silence. Others nodded. Not all, but enough. Gregory finally spoke. "This will change our operating costs. Training, audits, oversight." Jessica met his gaze. "So will lawsuits. So will public scandals. So will social media dragging your brand through the tarmac. This is the cheaper option." Then, after a pause, "And it's the right thing to do." That more than the threat carried weight. Gregory looked around at the room, at the tired eyes of people who weren't tired of change. They were tired of waiting for it. "We accept," he said. Unanimously. Jessica didn't smile. She simply nodded and stood. That week, the new policies were signed, announced, and uploaded to every internal portal across the company. Videos of training began rolling out. Department heads met with consultants. And slowly the climate began to shift. Not just with regulation, but with accountability. Employees began speaking out about past experiences. Some shameful, some redemptive. Conversations happened in employee cafeterias that had never happened before. Gate agents who once whispered assumptions behind passengers' backs began checking themselves and each other. Jessica didn't return to the airport for another 6 months. But when she did, things had changed. 6 months later, Jessica Carter arrived at the airport in silence. No press, no entourage, no announcements. Just her cane, her rolling suitcase, and a pair of sunglasses tucked into the collar of her simple navy coat. Her gait was steady now. Rehab and patience had brought her further than doctors expected. But the limp was still there, a reminder, not of weakness, but of resilience. This time, she wasn't traveling for business. No secret boardroom meetings, no mergers, just a trip to Los Angeles to see her sister's newborn son. But as she approached the check-in kiosk, her name triggered a flag on the system, not for suspicion, but recognition. A discreet note appeared on the attendant's screen. "Flag is VIP. Ms. Carter, internal designation, per CCO. The young man at the counter. Early 20s, bright smile, hair tied in a neat puff, stepped around the desk. Ms. Carter? He asked gently. She nodded. We'd be honored to escort you through pre-check and straight to the lounge. Jessica blinked once. Really? Yes, ma'am, he said. Company directive. It's part of the JCC. Took her a second. Jessica Carter Claus. He nodded. We all know who you are. She followed him quietly, but as they passed other check-in stations, she saw it. A white woman with a service dog was offered help before she asked. A young black man in sweats was greeted without suspicion. A woman in a hijab asked for a seat change. No side eyes, no whispers, just accommodation. The air felt lighter. Not perfect, but lighter. When she entered the first-class lounge, the hostess recognized her instantly. No hesitation. Welcome back, Miss Carter. We've upgraded your flight to our luxury suite at no cost. Would you like cucumber water, warm towel, or chamomile tea? Jessica raised a brow. You practicing for a hospitality award? The hostess grinned. Company culture's been different since you shook the cage. Jessica took a seat by the window, accepting the towel. She watched planes taxi outside the glass, fingers gently resting on the arm of her chair. Then someone else entered the lounge. Olivia, the same flight attendant. She paused in the doorway when she saw Jessica. A flicker of recognition, of guilt, of respect. She walked over slowly. I wasn't expecting to see you here, Olivia said. Jessica looked up, her gaze cool but calm. Olivia cleared her throat. I've been retrained and reassigned to high-altitude service mentorship. They made me go through every page of the Carter Clause. Jessica said nothing. I deserved it, Olivia added. What I did, how I judged you. I've had time to think about it. Still, Jessica didn't respond. But I also wanted to say thank you. I didn't deserve your silence. But I learned more from it than I ever did from anyone yelling at me. A long pause. Then Jessica finally spoke. You looked at me like I didn't belong. And now you're teaching others how not to do the same. She tilted her head slightly. That's growth. Olivia nodded, blinking hard. Safe flight, Miss Carter. Jessica boarded last, per her usual routine. But this time no one stopped her. No one doubted her. No one questioned her mobility, her status, or her presence. She passed by rows of economy class. A child waved at her. She smiled. And then seat 1A. She slid into it with quiet dignity. A warm blanket was already folded at her feet. A custom vegan snack tray waited on the console. A glass of sparkling water fizzed beside it. As she leaned back, the pilot's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Skybridge Flight 1904. Before we take off, we'd like to acknowledge one of our most important passengers on board today, Ms. Jessica Carter, a voice for equity and justice in the skies. Applause broke out across the cabin. Jessica didn't turn, didn't wave. She just closed her eyes and exhaled. Somewhere at 30,000 feet, between the layers of clouds and the hum of jet engines, Jessica Carter slept. Not because she was tired, but because, for the first time in a long time, she felt safe. Skybridge Airline's corporate headquarters was hosting an emergency meeting, one that hadn't been planned, one that, for the first time, wasn't being run by the usual names at the top of the executive chain. At the center of the room sat a nameplate freshly dusted off. Jessica Carter, Executive Advisor, Equity, and Strategic Mergers. She hadn't wanted to return. Not really. But some calls you answer because the future depends on them. It started 2 weeks earlier, when Skybridge's stock took an unexpected hit. Not because of any failure in logistics or fuel prices, but because of a social media video. One that showed a passenger, elderly in a wheelchair, being denied priority seating despite holding a confirmed ticket. The video went viral. Hashtags reignited. People remembered what happened to Jessica Carter. Except this time, the victim wasn't just a story. This time, Jessica was already in the building. The CEO, Everett Langston, tapped a pen against the arm of his chair. "We're bleeding reputation capital," he said bluntly. "And that's harder to rebuild than dollars." Across from him sat the chief operations officer, the new HR director, and the legal counsel. All of them uncomfortable, none of them prepared. Jessica sat quietly at the far end, a crisp beige blazer over a black blouse. Her eyes scanned the reports, the emails, the court of public opinion displayed in charts. "You hired me as a formality," she said softly. "A check mark in your diversity audit. But now that the storm's back, you want shelter." No one spoke. Jessica turned a page. You don't get to ask for credibility when you ignored credibility for convenience. Still silence. Then she looked up. "But I'll help you, because what's broken here is bigger than all of us." Jessica laid out a new initiative. Mandatory equity training for all frontline and managerial staff, not just DEI seminars, but full immersion, featuring real-world case studies like her own. Crisis response teams to handle incidents involving discrimination or accessibility issues with both speed and empathy. Audit-fueled incentives where each department's funding is tied to inclusive performance benchmarks. Not just profits, but people served. And most radically, passenger advocacy liaisons, former customers turned internal advisors, positioned in key cities to report, consult, and advocate. The CFO scoffed. "This goes beyond our scope." Jessica leaned in. "You've had years to create a better scope. I'm giving you a lifeline." Within 3 months, Skybridge Airlines wasn't just recovering. It was thriving. Passenger satisfaction climbed by 42%. Bookings surged in metro areas with high minority populations. Retention of female and BIPOC staff improved across all departments. And the board, for once, didn't wait until damage was done. They preempted it because Jessica showed them how. She didn't become the CEO. She didn't need the title. But she became something else, the conscience of a company. A reminder, printed now in their employee handbook under a new policy. Power isn't only in position, it's in the people you overlook. And when one of them stands up, the whole system stands taller. Late one evening, after her last meeting of the day, Jessica returned to the very airport where her story began. She sat in the same terminal, same gate, same worn leather seats. But this time, security nodded with respect. The gate agent smiled warmly. And passengers, some who knew her story, some who didn't, moved through the terminal a little more thoughtfully. She looked out at the tarmac, where a plane blinked in the dark. Not all stories needed a triumphant ending. But hers rewrote the manual. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to Jessica Carter's story. A reminder of how quiet dignity can outlast noise. How silence, when strategic, can be the loudest roar in the room. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and share this video with someone who needs to be reminded. Justice doesn't need applause. It just needs someone brave enough to walk in with a cane and leave with 4,000 Bitcoin in influence.